Now, I think that we can all agree here that over the years, ever since Disney acquired Lucasfilm and bought out, of course, Star Wars as a whole by George Lucas, we have seen a lot of ups and downs, and more lately, a lot of downs related to the Star Wars franchise, everything ranging from the Boba Fett series to the Kenobi show, all the way to The Mandalorian Season 3, and now with Ahsoka Episodes 1 and 2, there's a lot of mixed reactions I've been noticing. There's a lot of fans out there that have been quite happy about these two episodes. A lot of other fans felt that this story was very slow and out of touch with what they expected, but we'll dive into that a little bit later. This is Mike Zero. Subscribe if you're new and like this video to see future updates. I'm also on Twitter at Mike01. I thank you all so very much for the great and kind support. And let's get right into the subject, shall we? Now, we know that there's a lot of things happening right now between Kathleen Kennedy, Leslye Headland, and Jon Watts. By the way, they are all leading the up-and-coming shows known as The Acolyte and Skeleton Crew, which, by the way, Skeleton Crew is getting delayed until next year, seemingly, as Disney removed it from their release schedule for 2023. That's a big telltale that Skeleton Crew is going to be, of course, delayed until next year, most likely around, like, February or March at the latest. Now, moving onwards, there's something that is very crucial surrounding Kathleen Kennedy and what she recently did behind closed doors over at Lucasfilm and how it impacts a lot of George Lucas loyalists that are, of course, or were associated with Lucasfilm over the years. Now, we know one thing about Kathleen Kennedy is that there's a lot of things that she has done over the past couple of years, ranging from the movies to the TV shows and more. Now, on top of this, with Kathleen Kennedy getting ready to promote The Acolyte by this holiday season ahead of its 2024 release date window, one major development has to do with what Kathleen Kennedy recently did behind the scenes at Lucasfilm, as she recently fired a handful of Lucasfilm employees / crew and a group of creators, so to speak. What led to all of this involved Kathleen Kennedy firing multiple George Lucas loyalists that so happened to be working on the Acolyte series that began to raise their concern for the show that was completely dissecting Star Wars and its philosophy and rebuilding the brand from the ground up. The main reason why Kennedy fired these Lucasfilm employees that were loyal to George over the years had to do with a series of employees from multiple departments within Lucasfilm that demanded Kathleen Kennedy to stop certain actions with the retcons that are being planned and mapped out within the Acolyte and its spin-off that will essentially break the prequel trilogy lore and the canon material. Now, this led to Kennedy actually sending multiple requests upon these shows, and how Kennedy actually led to a lot of aspects of this and to creative differences with these Lucasfilm loyalists that led to their recent firing from working on both the Acolyte and the planned spin-off of the Acolyte series that will focus on a Jedi God who is planned to be the most powerful Jedi in Star Wars history by Leslye Headland. So let me just pause here quick before I get to the next piece of this development. Now, the thing about Kennedy is that she seems to be the type of producer, the type of president of a company that can never take criticism well and can never take a challenge well. When you have a growing number of employees, especially those that have been around for decades or years upon years since the George Lucas era, and they raised their concern about the direction of the Acolyte. Now, you guys may recall we talked about the Acolyte's showrunner, Leslye Headland, who, by the way, has made it openly clear that if you believe that George Lucas is the key to Star Wars and you only expect him to be the one in the room to make Star Wars great, then you're a misogynist. That's Leslye Headland's way of thinking, and yes, she did that in a podcast back in 2019. Now, the thing about this, though, the fact that Kathleen Kennedy is doubling down and upping the ante on the agendas that will be thrown into the Acolyte series, and how it is going to literally break apart the prequel trilogy lore and the canon material, it just goes to show you that at the end of the day, people like Kathleen Kennedy have no actual remorse over their actions, whether it be a bad thing on the company or a bad thing on the projects that they are working on, etc., or even the customers, right? The audience in this scenario. So moving onwards. Now, these loyalists of George Lucas also had growing issues with Kathy over the years with her direction of the Kenobi series with Joby Harold and Deborah Chow, and the Boba Fett show by Rob Rodriguez and what he had power over Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni from, what she allowed to happen in those shows, and how over a dozen employees that were trying to defend Lucas were put in the hot seats. These employees ranged from designers to co-writers, as well as directors and more, with the Lucasfilm loyalists fired and no longer working on any future Lucasfilm shows and/or movies. Kennedy is doubling down with her agenda for the Acolyte and its spin-off show that will be announced later this year during the last earnings call by Disney. The Acolyte spin-off show is set to feature actress Brie Larson as one of the main leads, and that Kennedy is in the process of hiring her for Star Wars as a whole. Now, we talked about this earlier this year, that Kathleen Kennedy is desperately trying to get Brie Larson on board of Star Wars, and this doesn't only have to do with the fact that Larson almost made it into the Mandalorian series through having a contact between herself and Kevin Feige and how that led to Kathleen Kennedy. Both Kathy and Kevin, by the way, are good friends, and this is exactly why Kathy had a lot of influence over the Marvel Cinematic Universe. In fact, she had a lot of influence over She-Hulk. We'll talk about that another time. But what's interesting about this is the fact that she can't take criticism at all from any of George Lucas's employees, from the past, that remained very loyal over the years and remained employed over at Lucasfilm, and that led to them getting fired by Kathy by really trying to challenge her direction and to prevent her direction from deeply ripping apart the prequel trilogy movies. Now, we know, Leslie Headland talked about this openly and very clear and vivid to the audience, that The Acolyte is all about a series that's going to break the rules of Star Wars, and it's going to deeply impact The Phantom Menace, and it's going to create a domino effect on all of the prequel films and how you view those movies, and it doesn't sound good, to say the least. We already know that this show is going to be, Leslie's own creation with a Star Wars label stamped on top of it. It's not going to feel like Star Wars, it's not going to look like Star Wars, really. The teaser that was presented at Star Wars Celebration, which, by the way, only the attendees got to see, was kind of bland. It really didn't stick out all that much. We know that it's a mixture of, and Leslie confirmed this, it's a mixture of The Matrix, Frozen, Kill Bill, and even, of course, other franchises out there, all bundled up into one show. Skeleton Crew is doing something similar by mixing Stranger Things with Star Wars and the Goonies thrown in there as well. So I think that you're just going to feel a lot of those tones instead over what Star Wars is really about and the value of the franchise. Anyway, guys, I would like to hear what you all have to say about this below in the comments, and if you guys did enjoy the content for today, make sure to drop a thumbs up on this video to support the channel, and I will catch you guys next time.
Night to moon, we hear them moans again. No.